Hey everyone, welcome to 18 Runner. I'm Dr. Chris Fielding, and each month I plan to read, write, run and podcast my way through my 50s, 60s, 70s and hopefully beyond. I'm a social scientist and I explore ideas from the academic world and apply them to my life as a runner. I plan to run successfully as I get older and help other people do the same. We're all running the same race. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can find this also on most podcast platforms. And if you're listening, you can also find me on YouTube. And I'm very much looking forward to sharing your company for the next, 20 minutes or so. So all sources discussed are freely available. So you can check them out yourself and you can find the links at agingrunner.com. Hope you find them useful. So this is the second of these monthly podcasts, and we're going to catch up on one or two things. We're going to dive into a great post by an academic called Sabrina Little, who's a professor of ethics and morality, and she relates this to her other life as an elite ultra runner. And this month, I also shared a couple of runs and car journeys with a chap called John, who's an 82-year-old ex-champion fell runner, and he's still going strong. And I'm going to pass on a few words of wisdom from him. But I'm going to start with a local legend in my part of the world. And this month has seen the death of a runner called Malcolm Pittock at the age of 93. And many of us round our neck of the woods have seen Malcolm out running many times. And at our local park run, we held a eulogy before everybody started to run. And I learnt a few things. I learnt that Malcolm was a very accomplished runner in his youth, running many sub 3-hour marathons. But that isn't why everybody remembers Malcolm. He ran the first of his 100 park runs the week before his 81st birthday. And the running community got together to clap him home when he completed his 100th park run. And then he went on to volunteer well over 200 times. He was an academic and a peace campaigner and an inspirational figure for many people. And I mention him now because I'll probably refer back to him a couple of times as we go. So, well, top job, Malcolm. So, how have things been going? Well, my running's going well. Yesterday, I ran my last long run before the Chester Marathon, which is in 3 weeks' time. And this month, the miles have been heavy. It's been well over 200 in August. I don't think I've ever run that far before. And I think that means that I need to delve a little bit deeper into the way that I'm eating when I'm doing that kind of mileage. I have quite a low-carb diet naturally, and it works well for me most of the times, but I think I need to be a bit more organised when the miles are heavy, and I know when it's coming up, so I just need to plan a little bit better for it. And it was an almost a 23 miler that I did yesterday, with a couple of runners who've got an ultra coming up. I'll let you know how I go on over the next 3 weeks or so, and by the time the next podcast comes out, I'll have done the Chester Marathon, and I'll let you know how it goes. But I'm going to pick up on a couple of things from last time that seem to have really resonated with quite a few of you. And the first thing was about hearing aids. And last month, we had a look at the link between hearing loss in midlife and dementia in later life. And I was thinking about that because I've got, historically, I've had some dementia in my family. And I went for a test. And I found that I had hearing loss in both my ears. And I'd just picked up some hearing aids on a trial. And I said I'd tell you how it was going. Well, it's going really, really well. The world is bright, and it's dull when I remove them. And they've become part of me, and I'm wearing them now. I'm not missing out on the conversations that I was. And I'm certainly not going to go back to my life before. And what I've noticed is people keep asking me about the process. And I get the sense that there are lots of people out there who've got a niggle about the hearing, but are either not sure about what to do or just need a bit of a shove to go and get a test. So I'm going to do a podcast just about that. I'm going to go through the process, both for private hearing aids, which, yeah, they are pricey, and national health hearing aids, because I took a good look at both. But you don't need to wait for that. If you've got a niggle, go and get a test. And I also talked last month about older runners becoming lonely. And I wrote a piece about that, and you can see it on Aging Runner. And I describe an experience that I had at my local park run perhaps about 18 months ago, where I arrived and I saw everybody in groups, and they were all chatting and smiling and having a good time. And you could see that it was just a natural, wonderful part of their week. And I ran my race, and I clapped a few people in, and I went home. And I hadn't spoken to anyone, and it was a painfully lonely experience. which took me back to memories of a couple of periods of loneliness in my life as a young man. And I realised that while I was focusing on my job and bringing up children and doing all that dad thing of running children here and there, I just neglected that side of my life, and I was in danger of feeling lonely again, and I resolved to do something about it. And I just wrote about that, and the response was amazing to me, really. People I didn't know were contacting me to thank me for posting about it, because it's out there and it's invisible. And it isn't just the elderly. Anyone can fall into becoming lonely, and it seems taboo for younger people to talk about it. So I think it's a theme that we're going to return to over the coming months and years. And I committed myself to replying to those on Twitter and to those runners who'd posted about the run, and not many people had replied. And because a kind word of encouragement cost me nothing other than a little bit of time, and I really began to enjoy the connection and the chat. So I'm going to continue with that. And I'd also committed to volunteering at Parkrun. And I thought that Malcolm, because I said I was going to come back to him, I thought that if Malcolm could volunteer over 200 times, well into his 80s, then I can do that. And then I started to do the maths, and I thought 40 times a year for 25 years. Well, that'd be 1,000 Parkrun volunteering sessions now. That's a challenge. I'm at 7 so far, so there's a long way to go. But the experience has been great. It's still not something I find easy. I can slip into negative self-talk whenever I walk into a group of people, and many of them know each other, and I kind of feel awkward and like I'm intruding. I mean, nobody's actually doing that to me. It's my own negative self-talk, and I know that that's the case, and I'm working on it, and I'm persevering, and I'm making connections, but not quite in the way I expected. I've kind of got this growing appreciation of how making connections is more about listening than it is about talking. And for me, it's about both having ways in to conversations and gracious way outs of them as well. And I've found that regular volunteering means that I'm seeing the same runners pass me by, and I can see the progress. I'm getting to know them, and it's nice to recognise their achievements along with them. And one runner afterwards stood with me for a good 15 minutes and told me all about his heart attack that he had as a young man. And there was another lad there who was only about 14, and he told me all about his experiences of learning how to be a cadet, and he was a cadet in the St John's Ambulance. And it was great to be there as an ear, and for me that's a win-win. And I'm heartened by the thanks that the runners give as they come past. So volunteering at Parkrun is adding a richness to my life, and it's something that I'm going to continue with. And I've also continued to make it down to club runs, and it would often be easier to stay in. But I've made it part of my routine, and crucially I've made it part of my weekly mileage plan. And if I don't go down to the club run, I don't get my miles in. But I'm always glad that I've gone. And our club challenge in August was to run as many times around our local reservoir as possible. And it's a 2-mile loop, and I was really pleased with my total in August of running 20 laps, 40 miles around this reservoir. But one of our group, Martin, got the bit between his teeth, and he was aiming for 100 laps. And a couple of us met him at 6 a.m. on the last day in August, a Thursday morning at 6 o'clock, and we did laps 99 and lap 100 with him. And he's 70 years old, leading the way, and he's quick. And in a month where I've done a few things, I've done the Great North Run, and I've run another couple of quick races, sharing that moment with Martin and another guy, Andy, was my highlight of the month. And it wouldn't have happened without me forcing myself out of the door and to get to club runs regularly. And slowly, you find your tribe. But you've got to make the effort. So that's what I've been doing. And I also been running with a group on Wednesday evening. And that's where I got to chat with John, who is an 82-year-old former national fell running champ. In fact, John was the over 70s national fell running champion. And back in the day, he used to run with my dad, and I think it was well over 30 years ago. And back then, I'm pretty sure that I ran with him maybe once or twice with him, with my dad and another chap. And John, at the age of 82, had recently gone for a run with his local triathlon club, and he was struggling to keep up. So, at the age of 82, he started to come to our Wednesday effort sessions. And now he said that he was able to keep up with a few people, which is absolutely brilliant. And I've shared a car ride with him, and I've shared a couple of runs with him, and we chatted about how to run successfully as we age. So I said to him, John, I'm in my mid-50s and I want to be running in my mid-80s, so what advice would you give me? And I wanted to know a few things. And if I was to interview John on this podcast, it would be really, really short. It's probably to do with my interviewing technique as much as anything. The conversation would go something like this. It would go, so John, do you just run, or do you do any cross training as well? Do you do any swimming or cycling? No, I just run. Oh, okay. So John, I know that you lose muscle mass as you get older, so do you do any strength training? No, I don't do any of that. And then said, John, so I can see you're in really good shape, so do you watch what you eat? No, I pretty much eat what I want. I've got an appetite like a horse. And so I said, so go on then, John, what advice would you give me? And he said, well, take it slow. I said, John, take it slow. You've just been to the effort session and we were running quick. He said, no, that's not what he meant. What he meant was, after you've done an effort session, he said, respect your body, allow it to recover, and make your next couple of runs nice, steady ones. I thought that was really good advice. And his other bit of advice was really good as well. And I think this is what singles him out from other people, I think, was what he said. His other advice was to run with people. And I think that's what he's continuing to do. And I think that's really, really good advice. So that's what I'm also going to do. Not all the time, but I'm going to head out and I'm going to run with people, perhaps a bit more often than I do at the moment. And one last thing, we came to a rocky downhill section when we were out running. We were down a path where, and a couple of times over the years, I've taken a tumble down there, and John went down first. And I think do you know what? I was a little bit worried, I have to say, but John was the most sure-footed runner that I've ever followed down any path anywhere. Those decades of running on the fells had just made him completely sure-footed, and it was a privilege to run with him. And from a connection perspective, sort of one thing leads to another. And running with that group meant that I've just signed up for the cross-country season with another club. So who knows where this adventure will take me, so I'll keep you posted. And I've done plenty of reading about both ageing and running this month. I've kind of let that restless itch of curiosity run free, and I've also given it a bit of structure and looked at what the academic literature says about the concept of ageing and how we view it. And what I found is that it's an absolutely massive field. But I'm a social scientist, I'm not a medic, I'm not a medical professional. I'm interested in how we make sense of the world and how we make sense of the situations we're in and how we learn new things. And in that respect, I discovered a piece on the I Run Far blog by an academic, an ultra runner called Sabrina Little. And Sabrina is assistant professor in ethics and moral psychology at Christopher Newport University in the US. And as well as that, she's an elite athlete. And her latest post in her monthly column is titled, Taking Humanity Seriously in Sports. And in it she says, to take humanity seriously in running is to recognise and honour the dignity of persons in our sport. And it was a really heartfelt piece, and you can find the link on Aging Runner. And in it she discusses the way that we tend to judge running performance using what she calls the parameters of youth. And I'm guessing that she means judging running success purely based on the ability to run quick times, and that implicitly communicates a superiority of youth over age. And I think as an ageing runner, I am definitely guilty of that. I'm continually fighting the urge to judge my success against my younger self. And it's interesting, because actually when I think about it, I believe I'm a better runner now than at any point in my life, but I'm not as quick as I was in my early 20s. So what on earth do I mean by better if better doesn't necessarily mean faster? And what do I mean when I say running successfully? And I think I need to explore that a bit more. But when it comes to times, I listen to the words of a runner called Joe Emus on the Running After Age 40 podcast this month. And what he does, he resets every year. And actually, that's what he does. He literally resets every year. And every year, he deletes all the data from his Garmin and starts again. And he's stopped comparing times with his younger self. He's just striving to beat his current self and get the best out of what he's got available at the moment. And Sabrina, in her piece, is at a time in her life where she can't focus as much on the elite level of the sport that she was doing in the past. And she goes on to say that she feels she's as much of a runner now when she's pushing a stroller as when she was competing at an elite level. And it got me thinking about who exactly she was directing that comment at. I mean, was it the community of elite athletes that she was part of, or is it herself? Or because I don't think it's the countless park runners out there who have little interest in who's at the front of the pack, or the many people who run, some of them every day, for reasons other than competition. And it sparked a memory in me of an online conversation that I can't quite let go of from a few years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, where there was a runner who was posting, and he was in an online conversation, and I got dragged into it. I couldn't quite help myself. And he was a runner who often won local races, and he seemed to regard everybody else's role in that race as simply to turn up and giving people to beat. And he had tunnel vision and had no real idea that for most runners, they viewed that run as an event and not a race, and had no interest at all in who won. They were running for that. And I think Sabrina's kind of interchangeable use of the words running and sport was illuminating, because running's a universal human activity that's got a competitive sporting strand, but it's only one part of running, because running's much broader than that. Those for whom competition is really important, I think they often forget that and assume that everyone's running for the same reason that they are, but they're not. And I love competition and I love racing, but it's not everything. No one owns running, and it's certainly not the elite athletes involved in a niche part of running that's become a sport. I think if it belongs to anyone, it belongs to all of us, including those pushing strollers and those who run and who have no intention of ever running in an event or a race. And I think that even when I was injured for 5 years, I was still as much of a runner. I was just a runner who wasn't running at the time. And I'm so glad to have found Sabrina's column, and you can check it out for yourself. And I'm going to just give you one last word of wisdom from Joe Emus. Joe also reminds us to just take our eyes off our watches and watch the sunrise. Just run in the moment, and don't forget to experience the run as it happens. And it's more than a time on a watch or a piece of paper. Every run is a memory in the making. Just don't let it slip by unnoticed, which I thought were wise words. And finally this month, I listened to a really good interview with an exercise scientist called Nick Tiller on the Way of the Runner podcast. Now, Nick's an academic who specialises he debunks the common running fads, and he calls out what he thinks is bad science. I mean, it was really good. And it can be hard for us to know who to believe sometimes. But what we're going to do, we're going to have a really good look at that conundrum next time. I think that's where we're going next. So, having started with the story of Malcolm Pittock, who did the first of his 100 park runs at the age of 80, I'm going to finish with the words of a chap called Bob Emerson, who this month became the first 90-year-old to get to his first 500 park run milestone at his local run in Northampton. And what he said, Bob, was, "My enthusiasm for life is down to park run, and it's kept me mentally and physically stronger than living life in my armchair." Well, power to you, Bob. And I think that's a good way to sign off. So for now, until next month, thanks for listening. We run, we chat, and we smile. Goodbye.